Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're going to sink gently beneath the surface of the world you think you know and ask a question that has echoed through philosophy, geology, and myth alike. What if we are not the first great civilization to walk this earth, but the seventh? So before you get comfortable, take a gentle moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if these deep sleep history stories help you find peace, sleep better, or simply reflect on our shared journey through time. Now, close your eyes, take a slow breath in through your nose, and let it drift out softly. Feel the weight of your body resting wherever you are. Notice the quiet hum of the room or the distant murmur of the night beyond your walls. And as your breathing settles into a calm, steady rhythm, imagine something unsettling and beautiful at the same time. Beneath your feet, beneath the soil and stone and concrete, lie not just minerals and fossils, but the forgotten bones, shattered towers, buried libraries, and drowned cities of 6 lost civilizations. The idea sounds like myth, like bedtime fantasy, and yet even modern science has begun to ask quieter versions of this same question. In 2018, climate scientist Gavin Schmidt and astrophysicist Adam Frank published a paper sometimes called the Silurian Hypothesis, asking whether it would even be possible to detect an industrial civilization millions of years old in the geological record. Their question was not about Atlantis or Lemuria directly, but about deep time, about how fragile the traces of industry truly are, and about how quickly Earth erases its own surface. Cities crumble in centuries, steel rusts, plastics fragment. In a few million years, tectonic plates swallow coastlines, glaciers grind continents smooth, and sediments bury everything beneath layers of silence. Compared to the 4.5 billion year age of the planet, our skyscrapers and satellites are as brief as a sigh. And so the haunting thought emerges: if another civilization rose 50 million years ago, or 100 million, built machines, altered climate, left monuments of glass and metal, would we even know? Or would their existence dissolve into the rock record as a thin, ambiguous chemical signature mistaken for a natural anomaly? As you breathe slowly, feel how small we are against geological time. Entire mountain ranges have risen and eroded away before the first human city was built. Oceans have opened and closed. Mass extinctions have reset life again and again. The word reset feels modern, almost technological, but nature has always known how to press it. Plato, in Timaeus and Critias, wrote of Atlantis not as a fairy tale, but as a memory of a civilization destroyed by earthquakes and floods in a single terrible day and night. Whether Atlantis was literal or symbolic, the story carries a pattern: rise, brilliance, hubris, catastrophe, forgetting. That same pattern whispers through legends of Lemuria in the Pacific, Hyperborea beyond the north wind, Mu as a motherland swallowed by the sea. Modern archaeology, too, has unsettled our timelines. Göbekli Tepe, described by Andrew Collins as a possible genesis of the gods, pushes monumental architecture back more than 11,000 years into a time when we once believed humans were only simple hunter-gatherers. Massive stone pillars carved with animals, arranged in sacred circles, long before pottery, long before cities as we define them. It forces us to admit something humbling. We do not know our own story as completely as we pretend. And so tonight, as part of this History for Sleep journey, as part of this bedtime history meditation on lost civilizations, we gently introduce the central idea: what if we are the 7th civilization in a long cycle of emergence and erasure? Not the first to master tools, not the first to dream of the stars, perhaps simply the latest chapter in a book written in stone and water. Imagine standing on a city sidewalk tomorrow, sunlight reflecting off glass towers, traffic humming, people scrolling glowing screens in their hands. Now stretch your mind forward 1,000,000 years. The towers are dust, the asphalt is sediment, the languages are extinct. A new species, perhaps, walks above us, unaware of the vast experiment that once flourished here. Would they see us as we see the builders of Göbekli Tepe, as fragments and puzzles, or would we be completely invisible to them? This is the question beneath our feet. It is not meant to frighten you, but to soften you, to remind you that permanence is an illusion, and that every civilization, no matter how advanced, rests on shifting ground. As your breath grows slower and your thoughts grow lighter, let yourself feel both the fragility and the wonder of being alive in this possible seventh age. If 6 worlds truly rose and fell before us, then we are inheritors of a deep, almost sacred uncertainty. And in the quiet darkness behind your closed eyes, while you drift closer to sleep, we will begin to follow the faint traces of those who may have come before, layer by layer, myth by myth, stone by stone, listening for echoes in the silence of deep time. And now, as you continue to rest in that quiet awareness of the ground beneath you, we move gently into Chapter 2. In 2018, 2 scientists with ties to NASA asked a question so simple it almost feels innocent, and yet powerful enough to keep you awake if you let it linger too sharply. Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank called it the Silurian Hypothesis. They were not claiming that an ancient industrial civilization truly existed 65 million years ago. Instead, they asked something more subtle, more unsettling. If an ancient industrial civilization had existed long before humans, would we even be able to detect it today? Let that question float softly in your mind. If they had existed before, if they had risen, built cities, burned fuels, altered climate, if they had vanished completely, would we know? Or would the earth have folded their memory into layers of stone, compressing their story into something indistinguishable from natural change? As your breathing slows, imagine the deep geological record not as dry textbook diagrams, but as a vast, layered archive. Sediments settle at the bottom of oceans. Ice traps ancient air in frozen bubbles. Rocks record shifts in chemistry like a slow heartbeat. When modern scientists study climate change, they look for spikes in carbon isotopes, traces of unusual metals, sudden warming events locked into ancient strata. Our own industrial age is already leaving such a signature. Plastic fragments drift into sediments. Radioactive isotopes from nuclear testing settle globally. Carbon dioxide concentrations surge sharply in a geological blink. Now imagine this pattern millions of years in the future. A thin layer in rock showing a rapid carbon increase, a strange distribution of synthetic molecules, a brief extinction event triggered by climate instability. Would future scientists call it an industrial civilization, or would they label it a volcanic episode, a meteor impact, an unexplained anomaly? Schmidt and Frank suggested that the geological record smooths and erases with astonishing efficiency. Plate tectonics recycle crust, erosion grinds mountains to dust, oceans consume coastlines. Even concrete, even steel, even glass will not last tens of millions of years. If there had been an ancient industrial civilization during the time of the dinosaurs, during the late Cretaceous, its cities would not stand as ruins. They would be subducted, melted, transformed into minerals. if they had existed before, if they had vanished, if we are only the seventh attempt, the Earth may have kept their secret perfectly. This is not science fiction in the dramatic sense, it is a meditation on deep time. The Silurian Hypothesis is less about proving a lost civilization and more about humbling our assumptions. We often imagine ourselves as the first to industrialize, the first to burn fossil fuels, the first to alter planetary systems. But fossil fuels themselves are remnants of ancient life compressed over hundreds of millions of years. We burn the past to power the present. If another species once did the same, the traces might blur into the same patterns we already struggle to interpret. Plato's account in Timaeus and Critias described cycles of destruction by fire and flood, where humanity repeatedly forgets and begins again. The Silurian Hypothesis does not confirm Atlantis, but it quietly resonates with the idea of reset. If there were those who came before, if they rose in brilliance, if they fell through catastrophe or self-inflicted climate change, would the geological record distinguish their failure from a natural upheaval? As you lie there, notice how your body grows heavier, how your muscles soften. The more your body relaxes, the deeper this question sinks into your subconscious. If they had existed before, if they had vanished, if we are simply the seventh civilization in a repeating cycle, what does that mean for us? Our cities feel permanent. Our satellites circle above like artificial moons. Our data flows invisibly through cables and clouds. Yet, on a planetary timescale, this entire technological web is thinner than a single page in a vast stone library. Göbekli Tepe already forced us to rewrite what we believed about early humans. What else have we misunderstood? The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us that absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence. It invites us into a quieter humility. Perhaps the Earth has hosted experiments before. Perhaps intelligence is not a singular event, but a recurring phenomenon. Or perhaps we truly are the first, and the silence beneath us is genuine. As your thoughts drift like slow currents, hold the repetition gently. If they had existed before, if they had vanished, if we are only the seventh civilization. The question is not meant to disturb your rest, but to deepen it, to let you feel the immense scale of time and the delicate brevity of our age. Beneath your sleeping body, the rocks remain patient. They have witnessed continents collide, oceans open, species bloom and fade. Whether they hide the memory of an ancient industrial civilization or not, they remind us that Earth forgets quickly and remembers slowly. And in that quiet forgetting, we continue our descent, following the possibility that history for sleep is not only about what we know, but about what may have been erased.
And now, as we continue drifting deeper into the possibility that we are the seventh civilization, let us turn gently toward the first name whispered in the long catalog of lost civilizations. Imagine the Pacific Ocean not as an endless blue expanse stretching beyond the horizon, but as a vast continent once alive with valleys, mountain ranges, and cities carved from stone. Imagine it before the waters rose, before tectonic plates shifted, before silence swallowed everything. Some call this land Lemuria. Others call it a myth. But myths, as Plato once hinted in Timaeus and Critias, often carry fragments of memory disguised as story. Close your eyes more fully now and picture the Pacific mystery in reverse. The waves retreat. The ocean floor rises slowly, revealing terraces of basalt and granite. immense stairways descending into what was once a ceremonial plaza. The sun touches structures that have not felt light in thousands of years. Columns stand in orderly rows, their surfaces etched with symbols no living language remembers. This is the vision that has lingered around the idea of Lemuria, a supposed sunken continent in the Pacific, a lost land swallowed by catastrophe. In the 19th century, scientists used the term Lemuria to explain biological puzzles, the distribution of lemur fossils across Madagascar and India. Before plate tectonics was fully understood, some imagined a land bridge that had vanished beneath the sea. Over time, the scientific hypothesis faded, but the myth grew richer. Lemuria became something else in esoteric traditions, described as a cradle of an ancient, spiritually advanced civilization, perhaps even a different branch of evolving intelligence. Whether symbolic or literal, the image remains powerful. A sunken continent, a lost land beneath the Pacific mystery, a civilization erased not by slow decline, but by sudden geological transformation. As you breathe slowly, imagine walking through one of its cities before the flood. The air is warm, filled with the scent of flowering trees. The architecture is not steel and glass, but monumental stone shaped with astonishing precision. Massive blocks fit together seamlessly, like those at Göbekli Tepe, reminding us that even our current understanding of ancient capability has been humbled before. In this vision of Lemuria, temples rise in geometric harmony with the stars. Knowledge is stored not only in written form, but in alignments, in sacred geometry, in the orientation of avenues toward solstices and equinoxes. Now let the image shift gently. The ground trembles, volcanoes awaken, sea levels climb as ice melts and tectonic plates adjust. If they had existed before, if they had flourished, if they had vanished, would their memory survive only as legend? The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us how easily geology conceals entire epochs. A continent can fragment, a coastline can sink, sediment can bury foundations beneath kilometers of water. Over millions of years, coral grows over stone, fish weave through former corridors, and what was once a city becomes reef. Imagine grand stone halls now covered in coral, delicate pink and orange branches growing across what were once polished floors. Fish glide through doorways that once framed human silhouettes. Sunlight filters down in wavering patterns, illuminating arches where voices once echoed. The ocean does not rage here, it simply rests, heavy and patient. Lemuria, the sunken continent, the lost land beneath the Pacific, becomes part of the slow breathing of the planet itself. As you lie there listening, allow your own body to mirror this stillness. Feel your feet resting quietly, as if they were stones at the bottom of a silent sea. Your legs heavy and unmoving, like pillars that have stood for ages. Your hips sinking gently into the surface beneath you, as though settling into ancient sediment. With each breath, your chest rises and falls like a distant tide. Your shoulders soften, releasing tension as coral releases its fragile branches into open water. The myth of Lemuria is not presented here as proven history, but as a meditation on possibility, a reflection of the central question: if there were civilizations before ours, how would we recognize them? If a sunken continent once thrived in the Pacific mystery, would we see it clearly, or only through scattered anomalies and stories? As your mind drifts, hold the phrase gently: Lemuria, sunken continent, lost land, Pacific mystery. Not as rigid claims, but as echoes. If they had existed before, If they had vanished, if we are only the seventh civilization. Beneath the quiet weight of the ocean, beneath the calm of your breathing, we begin to sense how easily memory dissolves into water and stone. And as the image of Lemuria continues to shimmer beneath the surface of your imagination, let us descend a little deeper, not into the ocean this time, but into your own body, into the quiet awareness that mirrors that drowned world. The idea of a sunken continent is not only about geography, it is about memory. It is about how something vast can exist and then disappear so completely that only whispers remain. If Lemuria was ever real, whether as a physical landmass or as a chapter of human longing, it would have faced the same forces we spoke of before. Tectonic plates shifting silently beneath the Pacific mystery, volcanic arcs forming and dissolving, sea levels rising during interglacial warmth. Over thousands of years, coastlines retreat. Over tens of thousands, entire landscapes are redrawn. Over millions, continents fracture and drift apart like slow-moving ships in a dark ocean. The lost land of Lemuria in legend did not simply decay, it was swallowed. Some stories describe earthquakes so immense that the ground split open. Others speak of floods that came not gradually, but in surges, as if the ocean itself had decided to reclaim what once rose from it. In esoteric accounts, Lemuria was home to a people said to possess a different sensitivity to nature, perhaps taller, perhaps more attuned to the rhythms of the earth. Whether metaphor or myth, this detail carries a quiet sadness, a civilization living in harmony, yet unable to withstand the deeper cycles of the planet. And here, in this history for sleep meditation, the image softens. Picture again the great stone architecture now submerged. Coral polishes the once sharp edges of carved reliefs. Sand drifts across staircases that once guided processions. Fish pause in the shadow of an archway, as if considering the memory of footsteps long gone. The ocean does not hurry, it does not celebrate destruction, it simply holds what remains. Lemuria, the sunken continent, the lost land beneath the Pacific mystery, becomes part of a larger cycle, like those described in Timaeus and Critias, where civilizations rise and fall not in isolation, but within recurring patterns. If they had existed before, if they had vanished, if we are only the seventh civilization in a long sequence of emergence and erasure, then perhaps Lemuria represents the first breath of that pattern. Now let your awareness move slowly upward through your body. Feel your feet still and grounded, like stones resting on the seabed. Move your attention gently to your calves, noticing any remaining tension and allowing it to dissolve as rock dissolves under centuries of water. Your knees soften, your thighs grow heavy and calm. Your hips sink deeper, supported and stable, as if resting upon ancient sediment layers undisturbed for ages. Let your abdomen relax. Each breath rises and falls like the tide over a drowned city. Your chest expands gently, then releases. Your shoulders, once carrying the weight of the day, now drift downward like pillars settling into sand. Your arms rest at your sides, quiet as forgotten corridors beneath the sea. Your neck and jaw unclench. Your forehead smooths. Even your thoughts seem to move more slowly now, as if filtered through deep water. In this state of stillness, consider the meaning of a lost civilization, not as proof of doom, but as a reminder of impermanence. The Silurian Hypothesis asked whether an ancient industrial civilization could vanish so completely that geology barely remembers it. Lemuria, in legend, asks whether memory itself can drown. And yet something always lingers, a story, a symbol, a feeling that we have been here before. The Pacific mystery stretches wide and silent tonight, covering nearly a third of the Earth's surface. Beneath its waves lie mountain chains, trenches deeper than Everest is tall, and landscapes we have barely mapped. We have explored more of the moon than of our own deep oceans. If a sunken continent once rose there, we might never find more than fragments, strange formations, unexpected alignments of stone. But perhaps that is enough, because the purpose of Lemuria in this journey is not to prove a map once drawn differently. It is to awaken humility, to remind us that the ground beneath us, like the ocean floor, is not fixed forever. If they had existed before, if they had flourished and fallen, if we are only the seventh civilization, then we too are part of the same breathing earth. And as you drift closer to sleep, let Lemuria become less a place and more a feeling, a sense of quiet vastness, a reminder that even entire continents can sink without anger, without drama, simply yielding to deeper forces. Your body now rests like that lost land, calm beneath the surface. Your breathing is the tide. Your thoughts are gentle currents passing over stone. And somewhere in the darkness beneath your closed eyes, the first civilization fades into the deep, leaving only a whisper that carries us forward into the next chapter of our long, uncertain human story.
And as the first civilization fades into the quiet depths of the Pacific, mystery, we rise gently from coral-covered halls and turn toward a story that has echoed across centuries with a different kind of gravity. Plato was not telling a fairy tale. In Timaeus and Critias, he wrote as a philosopher preserving a memory passed down through generations, a story that to someone somewhere had once felt real. Close your eyes and picture it not as spectacle, but as something solemn. An ancient empire called Atlantis, positioned beyond the pillars of Heracles, arranged in perfect circles of land and water, canals forming rings around a central sacred island. The city was said to gleam with metals unfamiliar to us, including orichalcum, a substance that shone like fire and sunlight. Bridges arched over concentric waterways. Ships glided through channels engineered with precision. This was not chaos, but order, not barbarism, but refinement. An ancient empire confident in its power, its technology, its dominion over sea and land. And yet, Plato's account in Atlantis, in Timaeus Critias, carries a tone that is less triumphant and more cautionary. Atlantis was not merely advanced, it was prosperous beyond measure. Its people had inherited divine favor, descended, according to the tale, from Poseidon himself. At first, they were virtuous, disciplined, harmonious, but over generations, something shifted. The divine element thinned. The human desire for expansion grew stronger. Wealth multiplied. Influence stretched outward. The empire that once embodied balance began to lean toward arrogance. This is where the story softens into something familiar. Not a dramatic explosion, not a villainous caricature, but a subtle erosion of humility. The ancient empire of Atlantis, so orderly in design, began to lose its inner alignment. Plato describes how the Atlanteans sought to conquer lands beyond their island, how they turned their gaze toward domination rather than stewardship. And so, in the rhythm of myth, the gods intervened. Zeus gathered the deities to deliberate, not in rage, but in judgment. The flood myth that follows is brief and devastating. In a single day and night of misfortune, earthquakes shook the island, the sea rose. The magnificent city with its circular canals and radiant metals sank beneath the waves. Atlantis disappeared, leaving behind only a shoal of mud, impassable and silent. Let the image unfold slowly. The tremor begins beneath stone foundations. Walls crack, water spills into streets. Citizens look upward in confusion, perhaps disbelief.
A civilization that believed itself secure feels the ground shift. The sky darkens. The ocean, once harnessed by engineering brilliance, becomes an overwhelming force. And then, silence. The flood myth of Atlantis is not only about destruction, it is about proportion, about the delicate balance between human ambition and planetary reality. As you rest there, notice how your own heartbeat has slowed. Like the rhythm of this story, it becomes steady, even, unhurried. Atlantis, in this history for sleep meditation, is not a spectacle of doom, it is a reflection. If Lemuria was swallowed by geological transformation, Atlantis was undone by a moral shift, by the quiet inflation of pride. Whether literal or symbolic, the narrative remains powerful. An ancient empire rising in brilliance, then collapsing under the weight of its own imbalance. And yet, Plato's account also carries an undercurrent of survival. The Athenians in the story, representing disciplined virtue, withstand the Atlantean assault before the final catastrophe. Memory survives in fragments, passed from Egypt to Greece, from priest to philosopher. Something always remains, a lesson, a warning, a question. If Atlantis existed before, if it flourished and fell, if we are the seventh civilization in a long chain of rise and reset, what are we meant to learn from its rhythm? As your breath deepens, allow the circular design of Atlantis to mirror your own breathing. Inhale, like water flowing inward through a canal. Exhale, like tide retreating from stone steps. The city that once defied the gods now rests beneath layers of ocean, indistinguishable from the seabed. Whether it was an actual place or a philosophical allegory, its image continues to pulse through our collective imagination. Atlantis, Plato, Timaeus, Critias, ancient empire, flood myth, not as sensational headlines, but as echoes carried softly into the night. And as the image of Atlantis settles beneath dark water, let us remain with it a little longer, not to dramatize its fall, but to feel its rhythm. The story in Plato's Timaeus and Critias does not linger on screams or chaos. It closes almost quietly. The empire that once seemed indestructible dissolves into the sea, and what remains is not spectacle, but memory. In this history for sleep reflection, Atlantis becomes less about catastrophe and more about consequence. An ancient empire that rose in brilliance, flourished in confidence, and then slowly mistook power for permanence. If they had existed before, if they had mastered engineering, navigation, metallurgy, if they believed their concentric canals and radiant metals made them secure, and if in a single day and night of misfortune it all vanished, then the lesson is not terror, but humility. Notice how your breathing has become slower now. Inhale gently, exhale fully. Like the tide that once flowed through Atlantis's circular waterways, your breath moves inward and outward, steady and calm. The pattern of pride and collapse is not unique to myth. Even in the modern reading of the Silurian Hypothesis, we are reminded that industrial traces can fade, that even planetary-scale impact can be reduced to thin chemical lines in stone. If an ancient industrial civilization had once believed itself untouchable, would the geological record remember its name, or only its carbon spike? Atlantis, in its flood myth, speaks in symbols. The gods intervene not because humanity built, but because humanity forgot balance. The moral arc of the story bends gently toward the idea that intelligence without restraint becomes fragile. And yet, within the fall, there is survival. Plato tells us that the memory of Atlantis was preserved by Egyptian priests, passed to Solon,
then retold centuries later. A thread of continuity remains. Someone remembered, someone recorded, someone listened. Even when cities sink, knowledge sometimes floats. Let your awareness move again through your body as we reflect on that resilience. Your feet remain grounded, steady as ancient foundations. Your legs are heavy but peaceful, like pillars that have endured storms. Your abdomen rises and falls with quiet certainty. Your chest expands slowly, your heart beating evenly like a metronome marking time long after empires crumble. Your shoulders rest low, no longer carrying the invisible weight of the day. Your jaw is soft, your forehead smooth. Like the circular rings of Atlantis settling into sediment, your thoughts drift outward and dissolve. The ancient empire of Atlantis, whether literal or allegorical, reminds us that survival is not always about strength. Sometimes it is about memory, about passing on what was learned. In Timaeus and Critias, Plato suggests that civilizations rise and fall in cycles, separated by floods and fires that reset humanity. If we are the seventh civilization, then perhaps Atlantis was the second movement in that long symphony of emergence and erasure. Its pride became its vulnerability. Its collapse became a cautionary echo carried forward through myth. And now, as your heartbeat slows, matching the quiet cadence of this story, consider this gently. What defines survival? Is it the endurance of buildings or the endurance of wisdom? The flood myth of Atlantis does not leave us with blueprints or maps. It leaves us with a pattern. Rise, prosperity, arrogance, correction, silence, then renewal. Not as punishment, but as recalibration. If Atlantis once defied the gods, perhaps the gods it defied were simply the forces of nature, of entropy, of imbalance, the same forces that shape continents and stir oceans, the same forces that will one day reshape our own cities. And yet here you are, breathing quietly, alive in this possible seventh age. The story of Atlantis does not demand fear. It invites perspective. It whispers that no empire is eternal, but resilience can be. As your breathing becomes even slower, like the final gentle waves settling over a submerged city, allow the image of Atlantis to fade not in violence, but in calm. Its canals fill, its metals dim, its towers sink into stillness. What remains is a memory carried forward, a lesson about balance, about humility, about remembering that power without wisdom erodes from within. And in that soft understanding, we prepare to move forward, beyond the drowned empire, into the next chapter of our long, layered human story.
And as the drowned empire of Atlantis settles into silence beneath the sea, we turn our gaze northward, beyond familiar coastlines, beyond the edge of maps where ancient cartographers once hesitated and wrote only myth. There, in the far reaches of imagination and legend, lies Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind. Old sources whispered of a place where the sun did not set, where light lingered in the sky for months at a time, and where people lived long, healthy lives in harmony with the cosmos. In this history for sleep journey through lost civilizations, Hyperborea is not described with thunder or catastrophe, but with longing. Imagine a polar civilization bathed in golden light that circles the horizon without disappearing. The air is crisp yet gentle. Snow does not bite but glows. Rivers reflect constellations that seem closer than they do here. The phrase, "land beyond the north wind," suggests distance not only in geography, but in memory. The Greeks spoke of it as a sacred realm blessed by Apollo,
a place untouched by war, where music and ritual filled the air. Hyperborea, in these ancient stories, was not a conquering empire. It was a paradise of balance. As you breathe slowly, allow that image to soften your thoughts. The idea of Hyperborea may not point to a literal continent fixed on a modern map. It may be something more subtle, a collective dream of a time when humanity felt aligned with the rhythms of nature. In Plato's world, cycles of fire and flood reset civilizations, but between those resets, perhaps there were intervals of extraordinary harmony. The land beyond the north wind becomes the symbol of that harmony. Now, imagine the Arctic not as a barren ice sheet, but as a landscape transformed during warmer epochs. Geological history tells us that the poles have not always been frozen. There were times when forests grew in high latitudes, when temperatures were milder, when animals roamed where today there is ice. If they had existed before, if a polar civilization had flourished in such a time, the ice that later formed could have buried their traces beneath kilometers of frozen silence. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us how difficult it would be to detect an ancient industrial civilization in the geological record. But what about a non-industrial one? A culture built of stone circles aligned to the solstice sun, a people who left markers rather than machines. As glaciers advanced and retreated over millennia, they scraped landscapes clean, grinding mountains and crushing settlements. What survived might be nothing more than scattered stones, misinterpreted as natural formations. Let your mind picture wide tundra plains beneath a sky that glows with aurora. In the center of that plain stands a ring of stones, not crude but deliberate, each stone positioned to frame the horizon at a precise angle. At the summer solstice, the sun touches the same point year after year, never fully setting. The people of Hyperborea gather there in silence, aware of cycles far greater than individual lifetimes. There is no rush, no hunger for conquest, only continuity. Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind, becomes less a lost civilization and more a mirror, a reflection of what humanity imagines it once was, or perhaps hopes to become again. Notice how your breathing mirrors that imagined sky, slow, even, light lingering at the edge of consciousness. As you rest, feel your body becoming still, like a polar landscape at midnight sun. Your feet are calm, grounded like stones set into frost. Your legs are steady as ancient pillars beneath open sky. Your chest rises gently, like a low wind moving across snowfields. In this quiet, Hyperborea feels less like myth and more like memory. A whisper that perhaps there was a time when human beings lived with less friction against the earth. The polar civilization, whether real or symbolic, suggests that perfection may not be measured in technology, but in balance. If Atlantis warned of pride, Hyperborea invites reflection. What if the third civilization in our sequence was not destroyed by arrogance or flood, but by gradual climate shift, by ice creeping forward year by year? Not punishment, but transformation. The land beyond the north wind fades not in violence, but in silence, covered gently by snow.
And as the snow settles softly over the imagined plains of Hyperborea, let us remain in that pale northern light a little longer, not to search for ruins, but to understand what this third civilization might represent within the quiet rhythm of our story. Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind, is described in ancient sources not as a place of conquest, but as a realm of longevity, music, and sacred alignment. The people there were said to live without illness, without war, in attunement to celestial cycles. Whether literal or symbolic, the image lingers like a dream half-remembered upon waking. In this history for sleep meditation on lost civilizations, Hyperborea becomes something more than geography. It becomes a psychological north, a direction toward balance. If Lemuria suggested a drowned beginning and Atlantis warned of pride, Hyperborea whispers of harmony lost not through arrogance, but through inevitability. Geological history tells us that Earth's poles have shifted, magnetic fields wander, ice ages advance and retreat, entire ecosystems migrate or vanish. If a polar civilization once thrived during a temperate epoch, its fate might not have been dramatic destruction, but gradual transformation. The sun that once circled endlessly above their horizon might have grown dimmer as climate cooled. Snow might have fallen a little earlier each year. Rivers might have frozen longer. The people, sensing the shift, may have migrated south, carrying with them stories of a golden homeland where light never died. Over generations, those stories would condense into myth. Hyperborea would become less a map location and more a memory encoded in language and ritual. Plato's cycles of catastrophe in Timaeus and Critias describe fire and flood resetting civilizations. But not every ending is violent. Some are slow, almost tender. The land beyond the north wind may have faded not in earthquake or flood myth, but in the quiet persistence of ice. And as glaciers expanded, they would have scraped the surface clean, grinding stone circles into dust, pushing evidence beneath frozen layers. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us how fragile the archaeological record can be across deep time. Add ice, pressure, and tectonic movement, and entire chapters vanish. What remains is longing. Notice now how your breathing has become even softer. Inhale gently, as though drawing in cold northern air. Exhale slowly, like a pale mist dissolving under the midnight sun. Let your awareness travel again through your body. Your feet remain still, steady as bedrock beneath permafrost. Your calves and thighs rest heavily, like earth covered in fresh snow. Your abdomen rises and falls like a distant Arctic tide. Your chest opens slightly, as though welcoming the long light of summer that never fully leaves the horizon. Your shoulders loosen, no longer bracing against unseen winds. Your neck and jaw are relaxed, your forehead smooth like a frozen lake untouched by storm. Hyperborea may not have left us temples as visible as Göbekli Tepe, nor concentric canals like Atlantis, but it left a pattern in imagination, the idea that somewhere, once, there was a time of alignment between human beings and nature. Perhaps this is why the myth persists, not because we have mapped the land beyond the north wind, but because we feel the absence of that balance in ourselves. In the context of our larger question, if we are the seventh civilization, then Hyperborea represents a phase of memory rather than monument, a civilization defined not by dominance, but by relationship. When climate shifted, when ice advanced, they did not defy the gods or challenge the sea. They yielded, they adapted, they carried forward what they could, song, story, orientation to the stars. And so survival in this third chapter is quiet resilience, not survival of cities, but survival of wisdom. As you drift closer to sleep, allow Hyperborea to dissolve not in tragedy, but in gentle transformation. The golden light dims, the aurora fades, snow falls in patient silence.
the land beyond the north wind becomes part of the great breathing earth once more. And in that calm, we prepare to move further into our unfolding sequence of lost civilizations, listening for what each one teaches about rise, fall, and the fragile thread of continuity that carries us into this possible seventh age. And as the pale light of Hyperborea fades into polar silence, we drift back toward the vast blue expanse of the Pacific, where another name lingers beneath the waves. If Lemuria was the first echo, then Mu is the long whisper of the ocean itself. Across the late 19th and early 20th centuries, explorers, mystics, and writers became captivated by the idea of a lost continent in the Pacific motherland. Among them was James Churchward, a British author who claimed to have encountered ancient tablets in India known as the Naikal or Naga inscriptions. According to Churchward, these tablets described a vast land called Mu civilization, a cradle of humanity that once stretched across what is now the Pacific Ocean. Whether one views his accounts as imaginative myth-making or as earnest belief, the story of Mu carries a different tone than Atlantis or Hyperborea. It is not framed as an empire that defied the gods, nor as a paradise beyond the north wind. Mu is described as a motherland, a Pacific motherland from which cultures radiated outward like ripples from a stone dropped into still water. In this history for sleep journey through lost civilizations, let us approach Mu gently, without urgency. Imagine the Pacific not as scattered islands separated by endless water, but as the high ridges of a once great continent. The islands of Polynesia, Micronesia, and Melanesia become the surviving mountaintops of a lost continent. Beneath the waves, vast plateaus stretch silently, now submerged. Modern geology explains much of this through plate tectonics and volcanic chains. Yet the image remains evocative, a lost continent whose fragments rise above the sea as lonely islands. James Churchward described Mu civilization as ancient, spiritually advanced, and interconnected. He imagined cities built upon high plateaus, architecture aligned with cosmic cycles, knowledge of astronomy and natural forces woven into daily life. Whether factual or speculative, the narrative of Mu speaks to a longing for origin, for a single Pacific motherland from which all human paths once converged. As you breathe slowly, picture a great coastal city upon a plateau overlooking a warm inland sea. The air is gentle, salt carried lightly on the breeze. Stone structures rise not in conquest, but in symmetry with the land. Carved symbols line corridors, their meanings lost to time. Ships depart in multiple directions, carrying seeds of culture outward across the Pacific. Over centuries, stories of this motherland scatter with migrating peoples, transforming into myths across distant shores. Now allow the scene to shift gradually. The ground trembles faintly, not violently, but persistently. The Pacific Basin is geologically active. Volcanoes rise and sink. Earth's crust flexes. If Mu existed before, if it flourished upon unstable plates, if its cities were built on land destined to fracture, then the disappearance of the lost continent might have been a slow unraveling rather than a single catastrophic night. Coastlines recede, earthquakes widen fissures, portions of land sink incrementally. Generation after generation notices subtle changes until one day the plateau is no longer whole. Mu sinks, memory sinks, the ocean reclaims. In the rhythm of this telling, repetition becomes soothing rather than alarming. Mu sinks, memory sinks, your thoughts sink gently into deeper calm. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us that geological processes can erase even industrial traces over immense time. Add the complexity of oceanic crust constantly recycled through subduction, and entire land masses can vanish without leaving easily readable signatures. What would remain of a Pacific motherland after millions of years? Perhaps only anomalous rock formations, puzzling similarities in myths across distant islands, echoes in language and ritual. In Plato's cycles, civilizations rise and fall under fire and flood. Mu's story aligns more with subsidence, with the patient lowering of land beneath waves. Not a punishment, not defiance, but inevitability. As you lie still, allow your body to mirror this gentle descent. Feel your feet resting quietly as if upon a submerged plateau. Your legs grow heavier as though anchored to ancient stone. Your breathing becomes the tide, rising and falling with unhurried consistency. Mu civilization, Pacific motherland, lost continent, James Churchward. Let these phrases drift across your awareness like distant islands on a calm sea, not as assertions demanding belief, but as soft symbols pointing toward a shared human question. Where did we begin, and what has the ocean kept hidden? And as the image of Mu continues to drift beneath the surface of your imagination, let us sink a little deeper into its meaning, not as cartography, but as memory. The idea of a Pacific motherland has always carried a certain softness. Unlike Atlantis, which burned brightly and fell dramatically, Mu feels older, quieter, almost maternal, a place not of conquest, but of origin. James Churchward wrote of the Mu civilization as a cradle from which humanity dispersed, its wisdom carried outward across the Pacific in waves of migration. Whether his interpretation of the Naga tablets was accurate or not, the longing embedded in the story remains powerful. It speaks to a shared human instinct to search for a beginning, a center, a place where all paths once converged before scattering into the complexity of our present world. Imagine again the Pacific Basin, not as emptiness, but as a sunlit plateau before it sank. Vast plains stretching between gentle mountain ridges, rivers winding toward inland seas, cities built not to dominate the land, but to align with it. The architecture of Mu civilization, as envisioned in legend, was said to reflect cosmic order, temples open to the sky, symbols carved into stone that mirrored constellations above, life organized around cycles of sun and tide, not rushed, not fractured, unified. Now, picture the slow unraveling. The Pacific motherland rests upon shifting plates. Beneath the calm surface, pressure accumulates. The Earth moves in increments too subtle for one lifetime to fully grasp. Coastlines fracture quietly, harbors deepen, islands detach like fragments from a breaking mirror. Mu sinks, memory sinks, and as the land lowers, stories rise. Survivors migrate to scattered highlands, to what will one day be islands across Polynesia and beyond. They carry fragments of language, fragments of myth, fragments of star knowledge. Over centuries, those fragments become creation stories on distant shores. The lost continent becomes a sacred homeland in collective imagination. In this way, Mu civilization is less about physical ruin and more about continuity through dispersal. Plato described cycles of destruction by fire and flood in Timaeus and Critias. The Silurian hypothesis suggests that even industrial civilizations might leave only faint geological signatures. But Mu, in its whispering narrative, invites a different reflection. What if survival is not measured by monuments, but by migration? What if the fourth civilization did not end abruptly, but dissolved into many beginnings? As you lie there, feel your body yielding further into rest. Your feet are still, as if resting on a submerged plateau now far beneath waves. Your legs feel heavier, like stone settling under centuries of sediment. Your abdomen rises and falls slowly, as though moved by distant tides. Your chest expands gently, then releases, like breath carried across open water. Your shoulders sink lower, tension melting like a coastline softened by erosion. Your jaw relaxes. Your eyelids grow heavier. Mu sinks, memory sinks, and your waking thoughts sink softly into deeper layers of quiet. The hypnotic rhythm is not meant to erase awareness, but to ease it, to allow the idea of a lost continent to become symbolic rather than literal, a reminder that even when land disappears, connection can endure. The islands that dot the Pacific today could be seen as remnants, not necessarily of a single continent, but of a shared human story shaped by water, distance, and resilience. Hyperborea suggested harmony. Atlantis warned of imbalance. Mu offers dispersion, a motherland that fractures not in punishment, but in transformation. And perhaps this is why the myth persists across cultures, because deep within us, there is a sense that we all come from somewhere older than recorded history, somewhere beneath the waves of time. As your breathing becomes almost imperceptibly slow, let Mu fade gently into the dark Pacific. The plateau lowers, the cities dissolve, the ocean closes over them without anger, without triumph, only depth. Mu sinks, memory sinks, and your body drifts closer to sleep, held not by fear of what was lost, but by calm acceptance of change. And in that soft descent, we prepare to move forward once more, deeper into the layered sequence of lost civilizations, listening for what the fifth civilization will reveal about fire, flood, and the fragile thread that binds us to this possible seventh age.
And as Mu sinks into the patient depths of the Pacific, we arrive at a story that does not belong to one ocean or one culture, but to nearly all of them. Almost every ancient civilization tells of a great flood. The strange thing is not that water rises in myth. The strange thing is what the water takes away. Libraries, towers, fire, memory. In this History for Sleep meditation on lost civilizations, we now enter the antediluvian world, the world before the Great Flood. Close your eyes and imagine a city built along a wide river plain. The air is heavy with summer heat. Granaries stand full. Clay tablets line shelves in orderly rows. Knowledge is not abstract, it is carved, stored, guarded. Astronomers watch the sky from stepped towers. Metal glows in furnaces. Trade routes stretch outward like veins. This is the pre-flood civilization, the antediluvian world described in different languages across continents. In the Hebrew tradition, Noah receives a warning of the Great Flood and builds an ark to preserve life. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim survives a divine deluge sent to cleanse the world. In ancient Indian tradition, Manu is guided by a fish that warns him of rising waters. These stories are separated by geography, yet unified by pattern. A world grows advanced. A warning is given. Waters rise. Most are swept away. A few survive. Let the image unfold slowly, not as chaos, but as inevitability. Clouds gather on the horizon. The river swells beyond its banks. Rain falls not in brief storms, but in unbroken sheets. The ground, once firm beneath towers and temples, softens. The first walls crack. In the antediluvian world, people may not understand what is coming. They have records, architecture, tools, perhaps even early forms of technology that feel secure. Yet water does not negotiate.
It does not argue, it rises. The flood myth persists across cultures because water is both life and erasure. As the Great Flood intensifies, imagine towers disappearing into white foam. Flames that once lit furnaces hiss and die under black water. The fire of technology, however primitive or advanced, extinguishes. Libraries dissolve. Clay tablets soften. Ink bleeds. The sound of human voices is replaced by the roar of rain. And then, gradually, silence. In Plato's cycles of destruction in Timaeus and Critias, floods reset civilizations, washing away accumulated knowledge so that humanity must begin again. The Silurian Hypothesis suggests that even if an industrial civilization existed millions of years ago, its traces could be reduced to faint chemical anomalies. Add water on a continental scale, and entire chapters vanish. The antediluvian world becomes not merely a myth, but a recurring symbol of reset. As you lie still, notice how your breathing mirrors the rise and fall of water. Inhale gently, like a tide creeping higher along a shore. Exhale slowly, like waves withdrawing from ruined steps. Feel your body resting safely where you are, even as your mind drifts through this ancient landscape. The Great Flood does not need to be imagined as punishment. It can be seen as recalibration, as Earth shifting into a new equilibrium. If we are the seventh civilization, then the pre-flood civilization may have been the fifth movement in this long symphony of emergence and erasure. Not evil, not foolish, simply fragile in the face of planetary forces. And yet, within every flood myth, there is survival. A vessel, an ark, a boat tethered to a mountain peak, a family or a handful of keepers carrying seeds, animals, fragments of language, fragments of law. As waters recede, mud remains, debris settles. Survivors step onto new ground, carrying within them not entire libraries, but pieces. Those pieces become the foundation of what follows. The antediluvian world sinks, memory sinks, and yet something floats. And as the waters of the Great Flood slowly recede in your imagination, let us remain with what rises after the deluge. The antediluvian world does not end only in drowning. It ends in silence, and then in footsteps on wet earth. In every version of the flood myth, whether in the story of Noah, in the epic of Gilgamesh, or in the tale of Manu guided by a divine fish, there is a moment when the rain stops, the ark comes to rest, the boat lodges against a mountain, a door opens, fresh air returns, survivors step out into a world that feels both familiar and utterly transformed. Imagine that moment slowly. The sky clears, mist rises from valleys where cities once stood. Mud covers what had been paved streets. No towers remain on the horizon, no libraries, no furnaces, no humming workshops. The fire of technology has gone out beneath the black water. The pre-flood civilization, the antediluvian world, exists now only in memory, carried by those few who endured. If they had built observatories, they now carry star knowledge in stories. If they had written laws, they now recite them by heart. If they had engineered structures, they now build with simpler tools, remembering shapes from dreams. In this way, survival becomes subtle. Not the survival of infrastructure, but of fragments, a seed, a phrase, a technique, a myth passed to a child by a fire rebuilt from driftwood. The Silurian Hypothesis asks whether an ancient industrial civilization could leave detectable traces in the geological record. The flood myth asks a different question. What happens when the record itself dissolves? Water does not preserve archives gently. It smears ink, softens clay, carries parchment away. And so the survivors of the Great Flood become living libraries. They hold within them pieces of a world that no longer stands. As generations pass, those pieces shift. The memory of a towering city becomes a story of giants. The recollection of advanced knowledge becomes a tale of gods who once walked among humans. The antediluvian world transforms into legend, and yet something essential persists. Across cultures, the pattern remains: destruction by water, followed by renewal; reset, followed by rebuilding. If we are the seventh civilization, then perhaps we carry within our myths the faint imprint of that fifth chapter. Perhaps our fascination with lost knowledge, with ancient monuments, with mysteries that do not fit neatly into timelines, is not accidental. It may be the echo of a time when everything was nearly erased. Let your breathing slow further now. Inhale gently, as though drawing in clean air after rain. Exhale softly, like water draining from stone steps. Feel your body deeply supported, your feet grounded like survivors standing on new soil, your legs steady as the first rebuilt pillars, your abdomen rising and falling in calm rhythm, your chest expanding evenly, your heart beating slow and sure, your shoulders relaxed, no longer braced against unseen storms, your jaw soft, your eyelids heavy. The antediluvian world sinks, memory sinks, but survival floats. A few people remain, a few seeds endure, a few ideas cross the threshold from one age into the next. This is not a story of punishment, but of fragility and continuity intertwined. The Great Flood, whether historical event, collective trauma, or symbolic reset, reminds us that civilization is not guaranteed. It is assembled, protected, and remembered. And when it is lost, it must be reimagined from fragments. As you drift closer to sleep, allow the image of rising waters to fade into calm reflection. The towers dissolve into foam. The fires dim beneath dark currents. The ark rests against stone. Survivors step into morning light. The pre-flood civilization becomes the foundation of what follows, and in that quiet realization, we prepare to move forward once more into the next civilization in our unfolding sequence, carrying with us the awareness that what was lost may still whisper beneath the surface of our own age.
And as the survivors of the Great Flood fade into morning light, we arrive at another quiet mystery carved not in fragile clay or fading ink, but in stone that refuses to disappear. Let your eyes grow heavier now, as your imagination carries you across continents and centuries, to walls so precisely cut that even a razor blade cannot slip between their seams. Who were the megalithic builders? Who lifted blocks weighing hundreds of tons when, according to textbooks, they possessed only rope, wooden rollers, and human muscle? In this chapter of our History for Sleep journey through lost civilizations, we step gently into the age of megalithic mysteries. Imagine Göbekli Tepe rising from the hills of southeastern Turkey, its T-shaped pillars standing more than 11,000 years old, predating pottery, predating writing, even predating agriculture according to mainstream timelines. Hunters and gatherers, we are told, erected these carved monoliths adorned with animals and abstract symbols. Let that sink in slowly. Before cities, before kings, before metal, stone rings aligned with the sky. The megalithic builders move in your mind, not with haste, but with deliberate rhythm. Hands on rope, breath steady, sandals pressing into soil.
A block tilts, wood creaks, a murmur of coordination flows through the group. No machines hum, no engines roar, only synchronized effort and patient repetition. Now drift to the pyramids of Egypt. The Great Pyramid once gleamed with polished casing stones, its geometry so exact that even today engineers marvel at its alignment with cardinal directions. The megalithic mysteries deepen when you consider the precision of its internal chambers, the weight of granite beams transported from distant quarries, the subtle astronomical knowledge embedded within its design. Official explanations describe organized labor, ramps, and brilliant engineering. Yet for many, there remains a sense of temporal dissonance, a slight misalignment with the accepted timeline. The same quiet question echoes at Stonehenge, where massive stones transported from miles away form a ring aligned with solstices. It whispers in the walls of Sacsayhuaman in Peru, where polygonal blocks interlock with such seamless perfection that earthquakes cannot easily dislodge them. Across oceans and cultures, the pattern repeats: massive stone, precise fit, astronomical awareness, a sophistication that feels older than the narrative allows. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us that deep time can erase technological traces. What if advanced knowledge once existed in forms not identical to ours? What if tools of sound, leverage, lost methods of shaping stone, or forgotten organizational systems allowed these builders to achieve what now appears improbable? We do not need to leap to fantasy. We only need to acknowledge that history is layered, and sometimes the layers do not align neatly. As you lie still, feel your body becoming like stone itself, your feet resting heavy and grounded, like foundation blocks set deep into earth, your calves and thighs steady, like vertical pillars bearing quiet weight, your abdomen rising and falling like a slow pendulum, marking time as ancient builders might have marked the sun's arc across the sky, your chest expanding gently, your heartbeat slowing, rhythmic, measured, your shoulders softening as though laying down the final stone of a long day's labor. In this state of calm awareness, the megalithic builders do not appear as mythical giants, but as patient humans engaged in work that required extraordinary coordination, resilience, and vision. Whether at Göbekli Tepe, at the pyramids, at Stonehenge, or at Sacsayhuaman, their creations outlast empires and floods. If we are the seventh civilization, perhaps the sixth left us not written records, but stone signatures. Megalithic mysteries remain because stone survives what water and fire erase. And as your breathing slows further, consider this gentle possibility. The timeline we know may be mostly accurate, yet incomplete. Not wrong, but partial. The megalithic builders may represent a bridge between cycles, survivors of earlier resets who carried forward fragments of knowledge into a new age. Their monuments stand like quiet witnesses, not shouting, not boasting, but enduring.
And now, as the image of those immense stones settles quietly in your mind, let us remain with the rhythm of the builders themselves. Imagine the megalithic builders not as mysterious magicians, but as communities moving in synchrony, breath aligning with effort, effort aligning with vision. In this History for Sleep meditation on megalithic mysteries, we slow everything down. A rope tightens. A wooden sled shifts a fraction of an inch. Sand is poured beneath a block to ease its path. Voices murmur in low tones, not shouting, not frantic, but measured. One stone at a time, one adjustment at a time.
If you were standing beside them, you might not witness anything supernatural. You would see patience, repetition, collaboration across seasons. The raising of a pillar at Göbekli Tepe may have taken weeks or months, yet in geological time, it is a blink. The placement of a granite beam in the pyramids may have required extraordinary coordination, yet to the builders, it was another day of focused labor beneath the sun. At Stonehenge, the alignment with solstices was not accidental, but intentional, suggesting awareness of cycles far beyond a single lifetime. At Sacsayhuaman, the polygonal stones seemed to flow together like liquid that hardened into form, hinting at techniques that modern engineers still debate. There is a quiet tension here, not of conspiracy, but of incompleteness. The official timeline explains much, yet the feeling persists that something about the scale and precision of these megalithic builders sits slightly out of phase with what we expect from their era. Not impossible, just remarkable. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us that civilizations, even advanced ones, can vanish almost entirely from the geological record. What if the sixth civilization in our unfolding story was not technologically identical to ours, but possessed forms of organization, mathematics, astronomy, and engineering that we have only partially rediscovered? What if knowledge travels not always through books, but through apprenticeship, ritual, embodied practice? As you continue to rest, let your awareness travel slowly up your body like a hand tracing stone. Your feet heavy and still, like foundation blocks resting deep in earth. Your ankles relaxed, no tension holding them. Your knees soft, your thighs supported. Your abdomen moving in a gentle wave, rising and falling like breath across a vast plain. Your chest expanding evenly, your heartbeat steady as a mason's rhythm tapping stone. Your shoulders releasing their weight as though you have just set down a massive block and stepped back to observe your work. Your neck long, your jaw unclenched, your eyelids almost completely at rest. The megalithic mysteries do not need dramatic answers to be meaningful. Their presence alone is enough. They stand across continents as quiet markers that humanity, in some earlier phase, achieved feats of scale and precision that still command awe. If we are the seventh civilization, then the sixth may have chosen stone as its message, not words that decay, not metals that corrode, but monuments aligned to stars, embedded in landscape, designed to endure floods, earthquakes, and shifting empires. Perhaps that is why they feel timeless, because they were meant to outlast memory. And yet even stone erodes. Wind smooths edges. Earthquakes fracture walls. Sand buries pillars. In this way, even the work of the megalithic builders is not permanent. It is resilient, but not eternal, just like every civilization before us. As your breathing slows even further, imagine the builders finishing their work at dusk, the final stone set, tools laid aside, the sky turning amber and then indigo. They step back and gaze at what they have raised, not knowing how many thousands of years it will stand, not knowing who will question their methods, not knowing that future civilizations will wonder whether they belonged to a lost chapter of humanity. The megalithic builders fade into shadow, the stones remain, and your mind drifts gently onward, preparing to explore the forces that have undone each cycle in turn. And as the last of the megalithic builders dissolve into twilight, their stones still standing against wind and time, we now turn gently toward the forces that have undone civilizations across deep history. Each time humanity moves too far, too fast, there is a quiet suggestion that the Earth responds not with anger,
but with adjustment. Not with punishment, but with recalibration. In this chapter of our History for Sleep journey through lost civilizations, we explore the destroyers, the catalog of catastrophes that have reset humanity again and again. Let the word catastrophe soften in your mind. It does not need to feel dramatic. It can feel like a slow shift in balance. An asteroid impact, for example, is not merely a rock from space. It is momentum meeting atmosphere, energy dispersing across continents. 65 million years ago, an asteroid impact altered climate so profoundly that extinction events reshaped life on Earth. Dinosaurs vanished, mammals rose. Not as vengeance, as transition. Imagine that scene not as explosion, but as brightness, a flash in the sky, a distant tremor, dust rising gently at first, then spreading, veiling sunlight. Temperatures shift, plants falter, food chains reorganize. Life contracts, then slowly expands into new forms. This is the long rhythm of planetary reset. Now drift to another scenario. Beneath the crust, pressure builds. Magma accumulates in vast chambers invisible to those walking above. A supervolcano does not erupt in fury alone. It breathes out slowly, then suddenly. Ash rises into the stratosphere. A volcanic winter settles over the globe. Sunlight dims, seasons distort, crops fail. Extinction events ripple quietly through ecosystems. Imagine ash falling like soft gray snow, coating leaves, blanketing cities, muting sound. The world grows quieter, the air cools. Not chaos, but transformation. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us that even an industrial civilization might be reduced to subtle chemical traces after millions of years. Add to that a volcanic winter lasting decades, and even stone monuments erode under acidic rain. Reset does not require a single dramatic blow. It can unfold as a slow recalibration of atmosphere. A minor shift in carbon levels, a gradual cooling into ice age conditions. Now imagine glaciers advancing, not violently but persistently. Ice sheets several kilometers thick pressing downward, reshaping landscapes, grinding mountains into sediment. Sea levels drop, then rise again. Coastal cities vanish beneath water, new coastlines form. Human memory, if it exists in that era, would record only fragments, a story of ice, a story of water, a story of sky growing unfamiliar. There is also the possibility of geomagnetic shifts, the slow wandering of Earth's magnetic poles. While not necessarily catastrophic to life, such changes alter radiation patterns, subtly influencing climate and biology. The dance of the planet is complex, layered, cyclical. Catastrophe in this sense is not a villain, it is part of the choreography. As you rest, notice how your own body is performing a reset. Your breathing has slowed since we began. Your muscles, once holding invisible tensions, have softened. Your nervous system shifts from alertness toward deep relaxation. Inhale gently, as if drawing in cooler air after volcanic ash has settled. Exhale slowly, like dust drifting back to ground. Your heart rate steadies. Your thoughts space further apart. Just as extinction events clear ecological space for new forms of life, your body is clearing space for sleep. If we are the seventh civilization, then perhaps each of the previous six encountered some combination of asteroid impact, volcanic winter, ice age, flood, or atmospheric shift. Not necessarily all at once, not necessarily dramatically, but enough to tilt the balance. The destroyers are not malicious, they are indifferent, and indifference in deep time can feel like destiny.
And as the idea of catastrophe softens into something quieter, something almost rhythmic,
Let us linger a little longer within this planetary dance. The destroyers are not monsters lurking in the dark. They are processes woven into the fabric of Earth itself. Tectonic plates drift a few centimeters each year, and yet over millions of years they rearrange continents, open oceans, raise mountain ranges, and submerge once thriving coastlines. What feels stable in a single lifetime is fluid in geological time. In this history for sleep reflection on extinction events and planetary reset, imagine the ground beneath ancient cities slowly shifting. Not violently, not suddenly, just enough. A coastline sinks by a meter, a harbor floods more frequently. Crops begin to fail in subtle ways as climate patterns tilt. An ancient industrial civilization, if it existed, would not necessarily fall in a single night. It might decline in increments, a decade of unusual winters, a century of drought, trade routes disrupted, food scarcity spreading like a quiet shadow. The term catastrophe often implies immediacy, but many extinction events unfold across generations. A volcanic winter might last years, yet its ecological consequences echo for centuries. An asteroid impact might trigger dust clouds and cooling, but the true reset is the chain reaction that follows. Species vanish, niches open, evolution recalibrates. The Silurian Hypothesis invites us to consider how fragile even advanced systems can be in the face of such forces. Our modern civilization depends on delicate atmospheric balances, global supply chains, and stable coastlines. A small atmospheric change can ripple outward. A subtle shift in ocean currents can alter weather worldwide. These are not dramatic explosions, they are adjustments in equilibrium, and equilibrium once disturbed seeks a new resting point. As you lie still, notice how your own body mirrors this principle. Earlier today, perhaps your thoughts moved quickly, muscles held tension from unspoken stress. Now, without effort, you are recalibrating. Your breath has deepened, your limbs feel heavier, your mind no longer races. This is your personal reset. Inhale slowly, imagining cool air entering after a long volcanic winter has cleared. Exhale gently, as if releasing ash into the soil where new growth will one day emerge. Your nervous system is not collapsing. It is reorganizing. The destroyers in our story, whether asteroid impact, volcanic winter, ice age, shifting magnetic poles, or subtle atmospheric shifts, are not endings in the absolute sense. They are transitions. They close one chapter and open another. If 6 civilizations preceded us, perhaps each encountered a different blend of these forces. Some may have fallen to water, others to ice, others to fire from below or from the sky. Some may have faded quietly as climates changed, as crops failed, as knowledge fragmented. And yet life persisted. Even after the largest extinction events in Earth's history, life returned in new forms. Forests regrew, oceans repopulated, mammals rose, humanity emerged. The reset is not annihilation, it is reconfiguration. Let that idea soothe rather than alarm. The Earth has reset before, and each time something continues. If we are the 7th civilization, then we too exist within this long choreography, not separate from it, not above it,
but participants in it. As your eyelids grow heavier, imagine the planet turning slowly in darkness, continents glowing faintly beneath moonlight, volcanoes breathing gently, ice caps expanding and contracting over epochs, asteroids passing silently through space. The destroyers are patient, the cycles are long, and your body in this quiet moment is following its own gentle arc from wakefulness into sleep. Your thoughts drift like distant clouds, your heartbeat steady as tectonic motion, your breath as regular as tides. Civilization rises, civilization falls, the earth turns, and you, safely resting, are carried softly into the next chapter of this unfolding story. And as the planet turns quietly in the dark, as volcanoes breathe and glaciers advance and retreat in their slow, eternal rhythm, we now drift towards something smaller, quieter, yet strangely unsettling. Not a continent sinking, not an asteroid impact, but an object resting in sand, a mechanism corroded by salt water, a map inked centuries ago that seems to remember a coastline we do not. In this chapter of our History for Sleep journey through lost civilizations, we explore ancient anomalies, those fragments that do not sit comfortably within the official timeline. Between desert winds, a diver once discovered a cluster of bronze fragments inside a shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. At first glance, they appeared unremarkable, corroded lumps of metal. Yet as the pieces were cleaned and studied, gears emerged, teeth interlocking with astonishing precision. The Antikythera mechanism, as it came to be known, revealed itself as a device capable of predicting astronomical positions and eclipses with remarkable accuracy. Dating to around the 2nd century BCE, it felt oddly advanced, like a whisper from a mechanical future embedded in antiquity. Scholars have explained it as the product of Hellenistic ingenuity, a rare but brilliant outlier. And that may be entirely true, but still, when you imagine those delicate gears turning in candlelight, tracking celestial cycles, you feel a subtle temporal shimmer. Not impossible, just slightly ahead of its time. Perhaps that is what ancient anomalies are, moments where the timeline appears to ripple. Drift now to another enigma, the Piri Reis map, drawn in the early 16th century by an Ottoman admiral. Portions of this map seem to depict parts of South America with surprising accuracy for its era. Some interpretations even suggest outlines resembling Antarctica without ice, though mainstream scholarship debates such claims and attributes the shapes to distortions or creative cartography. It may be exaggeration, it may be coincidence, it may be nothing more than layered sources combined imperfectly. Or it may be a hint of lost geographic knowledge carried through centuries. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable. Under the broad category of OOPArts, out-of-place artifacts, various objects have been proposed as evidence of advanced knowledge in unexpected eras. Some are later revealed as misunderstandings, some as hoaxes, some remain ambiguous. The term itself invites caution, yet the pattern fascinates. A mechanism too intricate, a map too detailed, a tool discovered in strata where it seems improbable. The Silurian Hypothesis gently reminds us that the geological record is incomplete, that deep time erases more than it preserves. But it also reminds us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. So we remain balanced. We do not leap, we do not dismiss, we simply observe. As you rest, allow your body to sink deeper into comfort. Your feet warm and heavy, your legs fully supported, your abdomen rising and falling in a slow tide, your chest expanding softly, your shoulders dropping, your jaw unclenching, your eyelids nearly closed. Ancient anomalies do not demand belief, they invite curiosity. They are like small pebbles placed gently in the shoe of linear history, reminding us that the past may be more textured than a single narrative allows. The Antikythera mechanism turns slowly in your imagination, gears clicking in darkness. The Piri Reis map unfolds like parchment across a wooden table, coastlines traced in careful ink. OOPArts rest in museum cases, silent, patient. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable as you drift further towards sleep.
And as the Antikythera mechanism turns softly in the darkness of your imagination, and the Piri Reis map rests open beneath a dim lantern glow, we continue drifting through these ancient anomalies, not to prove, not to persuade, but to contemplate. In the long arc of lost civilizations, anomalies are like faint stars glimpsed between clouds. They do not rewrite the sky, but they remind us that the sky is vast. The Antikythera mechanism, with its interlocking bronze gears, does not demand that we overturn the timeline. It simply demonstrates that human ingenuity has surfaced in unexpected moments. Perhaps there were workshops whose brilliance left few surviving traces. Perhaps knowledge blossomed, then withered, then blossomed again elsewhere. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable, as your breath continues its slow descent into deeper calm. The Piri Reis map, debated and analyzed, reminds us how knowledge travels. Cartographers copied older charts. Sailors shared rumors of distant coasts. Lines on parchment evolved through layers of transmission. What appears mysterious at first glance may be the result of accumulated fragments from many hands, or it may contain echoes of coastlines that shifted after ice ages when sea levels were lower and horizons unfamiliar. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable, as your body is sinking further into rest. OOPArts, those so-called out-of-place artifacts, often dissolve under scrutiny, yet their existence as a category reveals something about us. We are drawn to gaps in the narrative. We sense when a story feels incomplete, and in that incompleteness, imagination blooms. The Silurian Hypothesis, proposed carefully and scientifically, asks whether an ancient industrial civilization could leave detectable traces. The answer is cautious. Perhaps only subtle chemical signatures. Perhaps only disturbances in carbon cycles. Deep time smooths edges. Erosion erases inscriptions. Subduction consumes ocean floors. The geological record is not a perfect archive. It is a fragmentary manuscript, pages missing, margins worn. So when we encounter ancient anomalies, we stand at the boundary between curiosity and humility. We can ask questions without insisting on dramatic answers. We can allow mystery without surrendering to fantasy. Let your awareness move through your body once more. Your feet relaxed and warm, your calves soft, your knees unburdened, your thighs heavy against the surface beneath you, your abdomen rising and falling in an even rhythm, your chest expanding without effort, your shoulders melting downward, your arms resting like forgotten tools after a long day, your neck loose, your jaw unclenched, your eyelids nearly sealed. The world of ancient anomalies becomes less urgent now. The gears slow. The maps fade. The artifacts rest quietly in museum halls and beneath ocean sediment. Could be, or perhaps not. And that too is acceptable, because the purpose of this journey is not to solve every puzzle, but to feel the depth of time. If we are the seventh civilization, then the previous six may have left behind not only monuments and myths, but subtle irregularities in the record.
tiny misalignments, small curiosities. And yet, whether those anomalies point to forgotten chapters or simply to the complexity of human history, they remind us of something essential. Civilization is layered. Knowledge is fragile. Memory is incomplete. As your mind grows quieter, the need for resolution dissolves. The timeline does not need to be perfectly straight. It can bend gently. It can ripple slightly. It can contain blank spaces. You are safe within this uncertainty. The Earth continues its slow rotation. Civilizations rise and fall. Artifacts surface and sink again. And you, carried by steady breath and soft heartbeat, drift peacefully onward, ready to move into the next reflection in our unfolding story of resets and renewal. And as the anomalies fade into quiet museum halls and submerged ruins, we turn gently towards something softer, something warmer. Because each time the world has trembled, each time catastrophe has swept across land or sea, not every light has gone out. Somewhere on a mountain ridge, inside a cave, beneath a thatched roof, or within the memory of an elder, a small flame has been shielded from the wind. In this chapter of our History for Sleep journey through lost civilizations, we speak of the survivors, not only the bodies that endured, but the knowledge that crossed the storm. When extinction events unfold, when volcanic winter darkens the sky, when floodwaters swallow cities, it is easy to imagine total erasure. Yet history suggests otherwise. The antediluvian world gives way to a handful of caretakers. The megalithic builders may fade, yet their techniques echo in later architecture. Ancient knowledge rarely vanishes entirely. It transforms, it compresses, it hides. Consider oral traditions. Long before writing, myths as memories carried astronomical observations, agricultural timing, ethical codes, genealogies, and warnings disguised as stories. A tale about a great flood is not merely symbolic, it may encode real trauma. A story about a sky hero may preserve constellations. In this way, survivors become vessels of continuity. Around small fires, beneath open skies, knowledge is whispered from one generation to the next. No parchment required, no bronze gears, just repetition, just trust. Could be that after each reset, small communities formed what we might call secret schools. Not secret in the dramatic sense, but guarded in the practical one. Certain techniques shared only with initiates. Certain star patterns taught carefully, certain philosophical insights protected from chaos. In Plato's Timaeus and Critias, knowledge of earlier ages is passed down through priests who preserved stories older than their own civilization. Whether literal or allegorical, the image is powerful. Survivors safeguarding fragments of lost civilizations, waiting for conditions to stabilize before rebuilding openly. Let this image feel gentle rather than urgent. Imagine a monk copying texts in a candlelit room while storms rage outside. Imagine a desert sage memorizing genealogies so they are not forgotten. Imagine a group of navigators teaching children to read stars after coastlines have shifted. This is resilience, not loud and heroic, but quiet and steady. A stoic kind of endurance. Not resisting the storm with fury, but bending slightly, shielding the flame, and waiting for dawn. As you rest now, feel that same quiet resilience within your own body. Your breathing has grown slower, your thoughts less crowded. Muscles that once held tension have softened. You are performing your own subtle act of survival, moving from stress into restoration. Inhale gently, as if drawing in the warmth of a small protected fire. Exhale slowly, as though releasing the memory of storms already past. Your feet are safe and still. your legs supported, your abdomen rising and falling in a calm tide, your chest expanding softly, your shoulders relaxed, no longer bracing against unseen winds, your jaw unclenched, your eyelids heavy. Survivors are not always warriors. Often they are teachers, caretakers, storytellers, keepers of ancient knowledge who understand that civilization is fragile, but continuity is possible. If we are the seventh civilization, then perhaps we are not starting from nothing. Perhaps within our myths, within our architectural instincts, within our philosophical traditions, echoes remain of those who kept the light alive through catastrophe. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable. As you drift deeper into rest, held gently by the idea that even in collapse, something endures.
And as that small, protected flame glows softly in your imagination, let us stay a little longer with the survivors, those quiet guardians of continuity who carried ancient knowledge through extinction events and planetary reset. Each time catastrophe reshaped the world, knowledge did not always survive in monuments or mechanisms. It survived in memory, in cadence, in ritual. A mother teaching a child when to plant according to the stars. A healer passing on the use of herbs that thrive after volcanic winter cools the soil. A navigator reciting constellations when coastlines have shifted and maps are gone. These are not dramatic scenes. They are gentle transmissions, and yet they are powerful enough to seed a new civilization. In the wake of floods, myths as memories become vessels of compressed truth. A story about divine punishment may conceal a recollection of rising waters. A tale of a golden age may preserve faint impressions of a pre-flood civilization. Secret schools, whether monastic orders, temple scribes, or philosophical circles, often emerge in times of instability, not necessarily to hide forbidden truths, but to protect fragile ones. Knowledge can be delicate, especially after collapse. A few scrolls hidden in caves, a handful of astronomical alignments encoded in architecture, a philosophy emphasizing resilience, inner stability, and disciplined thought. Even Stoic traditions, though much later historically, echo this quiet endurance. The idea that external chaos need not extinguish inner clarity feels timeless. Perhaps that mindset itself is a survivor trait. The Silurian Hypothesis suggests that deep time erases industrial traces, yet intellectual traces can persist in culture long after material evidence fades. A lost civilization might leave behind no factories, no engines, no visible machines, but it could leave patterns, symbols repeated across continents, shared flood narratives, architectural alignments pointing to the same stars. These are subtle survivals. As you lie there now, notice how safety feels in your body. You're breathing steady, your muscles no longer braced, your thoughts slower, more spacious. You are experiencing your own small continuity through the day's turbulence. Stress rises and falls, tasks accumulate and dissolve, yet something within you remains stable, observing. That inner witness is like the survivors after catastrophe, holding a quiet ember until conditions allow rebuilding. Inhale slowly, imagining warmth spreading through your chest like the glow of a sheltered lantern. Exhale gently, releasing any remnants of tension as if setting down heavy stones after long labor. Your feet are grounded as though standing on newly settled earth after the waters recede. Your legs are calm pillars. Your abdomen rises and falls in an even rhythm. Your heart beats softly. Your shoulders sink deeper. Your jaw rests. Your eyelids almost fully closed. Survivors do not shout their presence. They persist. They rebuild gradually.
If 6 civilizations preceded us, perhaps each left behind more than ruins. Perhaps they left temperaments, caution encoded in myth, humility woven into ritual, curiosity preserved in careful observation of the sky. We might carry these inheritances unconsciously, in our fascination with lost civilizations, in our urge to record history, in our instinct to store knowledge digitally and physically. We are participating in the same ancient impulse, to endure, to remember, to pass on. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable, because what matters in this quiet moment is not certainty, but continuity. The Earth continues its cycles, catastrophe gives way to renewal, knowledge flickers, dims, and brightens again, and you, safe in this present hour, drift gently towards sleep, held by the reassuring idea that even after the deepest reset, something essential always remains.
And now, gently, return to the present. The stones fade, the floods recede, the ash settles, the survivors become ancestors. And here we are, glass towers reflecting sunrise, highways humming with motion, satellites circling quietly above the atmosphere, data flowing invisibly through the air. If someone were to awaken long after us, if they were to sift through the remnants of our cities buried beneath sediment and time, they might stand among corroded steel and shattered circuits and ask softly, they were which civilization? In this final chapter of our History for Sleep journey through lost civilizations, we turn the lens toward ourselves. We are the 7th civilization, at least within the story we have gently woven tonight. Not as a literal claim carved in stone, but as a reflective metaphor, a layer in a long stratigraphy of human striving. Modern civilization often feels permanent from within. Skyscrapers appear solid. Digital archives feel infinite. Global networks seem instantaneous and unstoppable. Yet when seen from the perspective of deep time, even our most advanced structures are temporary arrangements of matter and energy. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us that millions of years can reduce industrial traces to faint chemical signatures. Steel rusts, concrete fractures, satellites fall from orbit, data stored on fragile media decays. If we are the 7th civilization, then we too exist within the same laws that shaped Atlantis in Plato's Timaeus and Critias, the Antediluvian world, the megalithic builders, and every fragile society before us. This is not a reason for fear. It is a reminder of proportion. Imagine for a moment a distant future archaeologist brushing away sand from what was once a highway interchange. They uncover fragments of circuitry and wonder how it functioned. They find traces of plastics embedded in sediment layers and classify it as a marker horizon. They detect anomalies in carbon cycles and speculate about an advanced civilization that altered its climate. Could be, or perhaps not. And that too is acceptable, because what matters is not prediction, but perspective. As you lie there now, notice how your body feels. Supported, warm, present. Your breathing steady, your heart beating softly. Modern civilization, for all its complexity, rests upon countless individual moments like this one. Quiet rooms, gentle breaths, thoughts drifting toward rest. Fragile society does not mean doomed society. It means interconnected. It means dependent on balance. It means capable of both immense creativity
and unintended consequences. We have built machines that map the cosmos. We have deciphered genomes. We have connected continents in seconds. And yet we remain biological beings, breathing air, drinking water, relying on stable seasons. In that sense, we are not so different from those who came before. The builders of Göbekli Tepe looked at the same sky. The mapmakers of earlier ages traced coastlines with hope. The storytellers of flood myths sought meaning in upheaval. We are part of a continuum. If we are the seventh civilization, then our role is not necessarily to escape the cycle, but to become aware of it. Awareness does not demand anxiety, it invites appreciation. Each sunrise over glass towers is temporary. Each conversation, each act of kindness, each moment of learning exists within finitude. And it is precisely that finitude that gives weight to experience. As your eyelids grow heavier, imagine Earth turning beneath a tapestry of city lights. Some will dim, some will brighten. Over centuries, patterns will shift. Yet right now, in this quiet hour, you are here, breathing, resting, participating in this brief luminous layer of history.
And as you rest within this quiet awareness, let us remain a little longer with this gentle thought. If we are the seventh civilization, then we are not standing at the end of history, nor at its triumphant peak, but somewhere along its flowing curve. Modern civilization feels vast from within. Networks of light stretch across continents. Aircraft trace lines through the sky. Signals move faster than thought once did. Yet from orbit, Earth is still a blue sphere, turning silently in darkness. Our fragile society, for all its complexity, is held within thin layers of atmosphere, delicate climate balances, and subtle geological stability. This recognition is not meant to alarm you. It is meant to soften the edges of urgency. Every civilization before us believed, in some quiet way, that it was the center of the story. The builders of ancient empires felt permanence in stone. The keepers of sacred texts felt continuity in parchment. The engineers of modern civilization feel stability in code and steel. And perhaps they were all right in their own brief moment, because permanence is relative to a lifetime. A skyscraper is permanent compared to a breath. A century is permanent compared to a day. But compared to tectonic drift or orbital cycles, even millennia are brief. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable. As you allow your body to sink further into the mattress or pillow beneath you, notice the weight of your head supported, the slow rhythm of your breathing, the steady warmth of your chest rising and falling, your heart beating not in anxiety, but in quiet continuity. If someone were to awaken long after us to examine the strata of our age, they might find plastic sediments and classify it as a defining layer. They might analyze isotopic signatures and identify a sudden industrial surge. They may uncover fragments of satellites embedded in distant deserts, and they may wonder about us with the same gentle curiosity we have offered to Atlantis, to the Antediluvian world, to the megalithic builders. Were they wise? Were they reckless? Did they know they were part of a cycle? Did they sense their fragility? We cannot answer for them, but we can sense for ourselves. And sensing does not require fear, it invites gratitude. The awareness that civilization is layered, cyclical, and impermanent does not diminish the present, it enriches it. Because if this moment is finite, it is also precious. Each breath you take now will not repeat in exactly the same way.
Each night of rest is unique. Each conversation tomorrow will never occur again in precisely the same configuration of atoms and thoughts. That is not tragedy, that is texture. In the long narrative of lost civilizations, resets, and renewal, what endures is not dominance, but presence. Survivors carry forward embers, builders raise new stones, storytellers preserve myths as memories. And modern civilization, with all its satellites and screens, is still fundamentally composed of individuals sitting quietly in rooms like this one, breathing, reflecting, living. You are part of this layer, not separate from it, not burdened by its entire weight, just one steady heartbeat within a vast continuum. As your thoughts grow softer now, imagine Earth turning once more, the lights of cities glowing like constellations upon its surface. Somewhere, someone else is also drifting toward sleep. Somewhere, knowledge is being recorded. Somewhere, a child is learning the names of stars. The cycle continues. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable. Because what matters in this final, gentle moment is that you are here, safe, breathing slowly, aware that even in a fragile society there is calm. And with that calm, you drift, further and further, into deep and restorative sleep.
And now, as the lights of our imagined cities dim and the earth continues its quiet turning, we arrive at one final, tender question. Why do we not remember? Perhaps humanity's memory was not erased, but simply faded, like a dream dissolving the moment you wake. You try to hold on to an image, a feeling, a fragment of story, and it slips away like sand through your fingers. In every age, people have wondered about cultural amnesia, about the lost memory of humanity, about why we forget the very things that might anchor us. If we are the seventh civilization in a long arc of forgotten worlds, why do we not carry clear, undeniable recollections of the first six? Why are Atlantis, Hyperborea, Mu, and the Antediluvian world only shadows at the edge of myth? The answer may not be dramatic, it may be quiet. Memory is fragile. Even within a single lifetime, entire chapters blur. You struggle to recall the details of a childhood afternoon, the precise tone of a long-ago conversation, the exact shape of a dream you had only hours earlier. Now stretch that fragility across centuries, across millennia, across geological epochs. Wars burn libraries, empires collapse and rewrite narratives, religions reshape stories into allegory or moral teaching, languages die, taking nuance and meaning with them. Floods erase coastal settlements, earthquakes swallow cities. Time itself is a patient editor, abrading clarity into symbol. Could be, or perhaps not, and that too is acceptable, because forgetting is not always failure. Sometimes it is adaptation. In Plato's Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis survives only as a tale passed from priest to lawgiver to philosopher, already filtered, already interpreted, already softened by retelling. Andrew Collins writes about Göbekli Tepe as a memory encoded in stone, long before writing as we know it. Perhaps myths are not literal archives, but emotional fossils, not blueprints, but impressions. The Silurian Hypothesis asks whether an industrial civilization millions of years ago would leave traces detectable to us. Perhaps the deeper question is whether psychological traces would survive at all. Imagine collective memory as a shoreline. Each generation is a tide. Some impressions deepen into rock, others are washed smooth. Trauma accelerates forgetting.
After catastrophe, survival demands forward motion. People rebuild. They focus on food, shelter, children. The past becomes heavy. It becomes a burden. And so it fades. Cultural amnesia may not be conspiracy. It may be mercy. The human nervous system is not designed to carry infinite grief. Just as you forget most of your dreams by morning, perhaps civilizations forget their nightmares in order to continue. Notice how this feels within you now. You cannot recall every breath you have taken today. You cannot replay every heartbeat, and yet your body remembers how to breathe. Your heart remembers how to beat. Memory is layered. Conscious recall is only the surface. Beneath it lies embodied knowledge, instinct, pattern, resonance. Perhaps the lost memory of humanity lives there, in archetypes, in recurring flood myths across continents, in shared symbols of golden ages and great falls, in the universal longing for a lost harmony. Why we forget may not have a single cause. It may be war, religion, erosion, translation, reinterpretation. It may be something as simple as entropy. Information disperses, structures decay, minds change. But tonight, this is not a problem to solve. It is a gentle recognition. And tonight, you are allowed to forget. You are allowed to let go of the heavy details, the unfinished tasks, the lingering worries. Just as civilizations shed layers, you can release the day. Just as myths soften sharp history into story, you can soften sharp tension into breath. You do not need to carry the entire arc of humanity into sleep. You only need this moment, this steady rhythm, this calm awareness. And as your thoughts loosen like sand slipping from an open hand, you keep only what matters, the feeling of safety, the quiet hum of existence, the simple miracle of being here at all.
You have traveled through 7 civilizations, 7 risings, and 7 softenings into silence, without ever leaving your pillow. You have walked among circular cities and drowned empires, stood beneath polar suns that never seemed to set, traced the outlines of lost continents, listened to the quiet labor of megalithic builders, felt the long breath of catastrophe, and returned gently to the fragile brilliance of our own modern civilization. And now, there is nothing left to solve, no final proof to uncover, no ancient map to decode. This has been a sleep story, a relaxing history carried on a slow current of imagination in memory. The questions that guided us, what wiped out the first 6, why we forget, whether we are the 7th civilization, can now loosen their grip. They can dissolve like mist over water at dawn. In the spirit of history for sleep, we do not end with certainty. We end with calm. Imagine the earth at night once more, the oceans dark and vast, the continents quiet. Somewhere beneath the waves, in the mind's eye, the faint outline of Atlantis glimmers like a distant lantern. Far to the north, Hyperborea shimmers in pale aurora. Across the Pacific, Mu rests beneath slow-moving currents. The antediluvian world is no longer roaring with flood, but resting in stillness. The megalithic stones stand patient under starlight. The anomalies, the survivors, the resets, all of it now softened, rounded, no longer sharp. The Silurian Hypothesis whispers that civilizations may come and go without leaving obvious scars. Plato whispers through Timaeus and Critias that even the greatest empire can become a story. Göbekli Tepe stands as a reminder that memory can be carved in stone long before words exist. And you, lying here,
are part of that long, unbroken chain of breath and awareness. You do not need to carry the weight of deep time. You do not need to remember every civilization. You do not need to predict the next reset. Tonight, you are simply a living being in a quiet room, listening to a bedtime story that drifts gently toward stillness. Let your breathing slow. Inhale and exhale. Feel how the air moves in and out. Each breath a tide, each exhale a small release. The journey through lost civilizations now folds inward. The drowned cities become reflections of light on water. The stone circles become distant silhouettes against the horizon. The questions fade. The answers fade. Only the rhythm remains. This is the final turning of the page in our relaxing history. There is nothing beyond it that requires effort, nothing hidden behind it that demands attention. Just the soft continuation of your own inner world. Drift into sleep. Drift into sleep as the cities of the past dim into points of light far across a dark sea. Drift into sleep as the noise of modern civilization becomes a distant hum. Drift into sleep knowing that whether we are the seventh civilization or simply one more layer in an endless cycle, this moment is enough. Your breathing is steady, your body is heavy, your thoughts are soft. The lost worlds are quiet now, the oceans are calm, the stones are still. And you drift, slower now, deeper now, further now, into a gentle, unbroken sleep.